All right, welcome back to the channel. So Andre Ward responds to the Canelo Alvarez saying something about him and pretty much says, look, man, this is a lot of media or internet gossip that is really driving this conversation between him and Canelo Alvarez. I'm not quite sure if I believe him 100%, but let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to talk about two of the best fighters that have been fighting this century and a really good fight that's coming up that I think a lot of people are underestimating. And the two fighters are Andre Ward, Canelo Alvarez, and the fight is the one that's going to take place between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant. But before I get into that, make sure if you're not subscribed to the channel to subscribe to the channel. Also like the video, share the video, do all those good things for me because it really does help the channel grow. I love this conversation about Canelo Alvarez and Andre Ward, and and this kind of, I do believe, media created back and forth that's going on, is going on between them. Yesterday there was an interview with Fight Hype where Andre Ward sat down. I believe his name is Ben Thompson. And basically, was interviewed about it and was asked about it and gave his 2 cents. And pretty much what he says is, look, man, I don't have any beef. There's a lot of things that are going on around that are not true. Number one, he said that he's not actually training Caleb Plant, that a lot of people come and ask for help or whatever. And so Caleb Plant called him. He said he wanted to come down, go to Andre Ward's gym. So Andre Ward said, okay, come on. Yeah, we can do it. Because Andre Ward, and I really I'm a huge fan of Andre Ward. I know there's some things that he says on just like with anybody, there's things that he says like on ESPN that I may not agree with, but just generally speaking, man, I think this guy is a class act, man, a really, really good dude. And what he says is, look, he said he wants to be in the position in boxing to be kind of like a Kobe Bryant type of guy where, if anybody, who's up and coming fighter or an established fighter are looking and trying to figure some stuff out and they want to understand the mental side of the game or anything like that, that they could call him and that he would, answer the call and give him his advice. So that's what he said he did with Caleb Plant. He said he's not training Caleb Plant. He said that Caleb Plant has a team that's together that has been there for years. And, he is not going to do anything that's going to counteract or contradict what his coaches or, what his coaches and what his system already is. He just wants to amplify it and give his 2 cents and give, see if there's anything he can do, for Caleb Plant. He also mentioned that as far as the fight goes with Caleb Plant, that he believes that Caleb Plant is a live underdog in that fight. And that's something that I agree with, that, and he pointed out, he's like, some of these fighters, they get built up as if they're undefeatable and nobody believes that they're defeatable until they lose. And I think that is most definitely the situation with Canelo Alvarez, because whenever you hear about Canelo Alvarez fighting anybody, there's a throng of people that jump in there and say, hey, man, this guy has no chance against him. Jamal Charlo has no chance against him. This guy has no chance against him. That guy has no chance against him. And the fact of the matter is that that's just not true, right? The fact of the matter is that anybody that gets into a ring that is a highly, highly skilled fighter has a chance to beat the other guy. Now, the chances may not be incredibly high, and you can favor Canelo Alvarez in those fights, but on any given night, if a guy is really on, or if he's just got a style and got a knack about him that is very difficult for Canelo Alvarez to figure out, then you can really wind up with Canelo having a loss. And that's something that we have seen in the past. We've seen it in the past with Erislandy Lara. We saw it in the past with Austin Trout. You definitely saw it in the past with Floyd Mayweather Jr. So the idea that 3 guys could fight Canelo Alvarez to the point where people think that he beat Canelo, and actually you can throw Gennady Golovkin in there, even though I disagree. I think Canelo won both of those Gennady Golovkin fights, but Gennady Golovkin was definitely, in there with Canelo. It wasn't some gigantic blowout, right? So 4 guys that are out there that have fought Canelo Alvarez, 1 guy beat him, 3 guys gave him really, really good fights, that there is other guys out there that very well may be able to do the same thing. But, just in the mind's eye of the boxing public, they just haven't seen it yet. And that's one of the points that Andre Ward made about Caleb Plant, man, and just said that that's why he was working with him. And he also pointed out, as far as like the rivalry and this all the call out stuff that is supposed to be going on between him, and Canelo Alvarez, that, that stuff, I think that there's just a lot of smoke behind that. I mean, it's a very, very, very fun conversation to have. I like to have the conversation with people because they both, Andre Ward and Canelo Alvarez, did fight, at the same time. And I personally think that it is Andre Ward that is the best fighter since Floyd Mayweather Jr. and the second best fighter this century. I don't think that Canelo Alvarez is on his level. I do not think Manny Pacquiao is as good a fighter as Andre Ward. So I like the conversation of what would happen between Canelo Alvarez and Andre Ward. But the simple fact is, and this is what Andre Ward pointed out, is that Canelo Alvarez has never said Andre Ward's name, not when he was fighting, not when he was, early in his retirement trying to get him out. It's nothing that Canelo Alvarez ever sought out. And the training of Caleb Plant, according to Andre Ward, is nothing personal against Canelo Alvarez. He's just saying, look, I don't know Canelo Alvarez. There are circumstances in fights where Andre Ward said he would step back and not do that, right? Where he would not give people pointers and say, this is what I think you should do against Canelo, or this is, so because obviously that's what he's doing with, and he's admitting that he's doing with Caleb Plant is giving him, his opinion on how to approach the fight with Canelo Alvarez and what he would do and what things he sees in Canelo Alvarez to allow, Caleb Plant to win the fight. But, Andre Ward saying that's not anything, where I have a problem with Canelo Alvarez. It's just that I don't know Canelo Alvarez, so I don't owe him any bit of loyalty, right? And he knows Caleb Plant, so he'll work with Caleb Plant. He said if it was a situation like, Terrence Crawford versus Sean Porter, he wouldn't talk to either because he knows both guys. He would not give advice to Terrence Crawford specifically on how to beat Sean Porter. He wouldn't give, information specifically on Sean Porter about how to beat Terrence Crawford because, that would be him getting in the middle of the fight. But as far as Canelo Alvarez goes, he doesn't have a problem getting in the middle of the fight because he doesn't know Canelo Alvarez. They don't have a relationship, right? And I really like the way that he explained it. Again, man, because it just reinforces for me, that at very least behind the scenes, that Andre Ward is getting the respect that Andre Ward deserves as far as being a great fighter. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't take it too lightly that Andre Ward is giving him pointers about Canelo, because Andre Ward is one of the best boxing minds that there is in the game today. And he, a guy that hasn't lost a fight since he was 12 years old. It was funny. It was 12 years old until he fought Kovalev, and they had to find a way to move it up. All of a sudden, he hadn't lost a fight since he was 13, but hadn't lost a fight since he was 12 or 13 years old. An Olympic gold medalist, and I don't care what people talk about, what his best fights were, and his best fights were only these guys. He never lost as a professional. He took on the best challengers that were there. He beat Chad Dawson, he beat Sergey Kovalev, he beat Carl Froch, he beat Miguel Kessler. Right, he beat Sullivan Barrera coming off of a very, very layoff, and Sullivan Barrera is a good fighter, and plus Andre Ward's not that big a guy. He's a guy that probably could have started his career at 160 pounds and squeezed down there the whole time. He's definitely not a big 168 pounder, and he was a small 175 pounder, and he beat Sergey Kovalev when Sergey Kovalev was supposed to be the man, right? And then beat him one time, got the win the first time. People didn't like it. Proved himself, came back and fought him the second time and knocked Sergey Kovalev out, figured out the puzzle on the big guy. And also he says something about, I think that really does matter, about Caleb Plant, and said that Caleb Plant at a certain point in time is going to have to go rattle Canelo Alvarez's cage. He's not going to be able to just slip, move, and do all kind of stuff to get out, and never really step to Canelo and try to get, and try to put, some hurt on Canelo. So I think that, we're going to see some interesting things in this fight between Caleb Plant and Canelo Alvarez. And I'm really glad that, that Andre Ward's involved in some type of way, man. Big fan of Andre Ward. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.